All right, greetings and thank you for this special replay. We're going to be replaying some of the Gray Stage podcasts, starting with the kitchen chapter. And let's see, that would actually begin on page 49 of the book. So that's where we're going to start here today, page 49. And we'll see how far we get there, and we'll start with that and kind of roll through. So this would be episode number 10. So that's where we're going to start here today. And if you have not gotten the book, you can download this free right now. Just go to thegraystage.com. You can download it right there for free. It's right at the very top. If you do want to purchase this, you can purchase this. If you would like to hold off until I get a hardcover, I am working on a hardcover copy. Just got a few more projects here to work on, and then get back into this one here as far as writing materials. So that is all in the works. God bless you all. Thank you all again for helping keep this case alive. It means so much because that is how we are going to get the case reopened, and that is how we're going to make sure David's name stays cleared. As many people have already pointed out, I think we've done a great job of making sure that people understand David is not guilty. So in some way we have gotten justice. We need to continue that because we want to make sure people understand that David is not guilty, cannot be proven guilty. Therefore, he is innocent. So that is a very important thing because we're getting new people come into the Justice for David Crowley and Family Facebook group all of the time. New people come into the website, listening to the podcast, watching these videos, watching Catherine's videos. And so many other great researchers, so many other great people out there doing a lot of work. Maybe not so publicly, let's put it like that. So thank you all, God bless you all, and let's go ahead and begin with these replays, starting at the Gray Stage Podcast, episode number 10. This is the kitchen. You would think the kitchen laptop, you would think there wouldn't be that much to this one, and maybe there isn't. You tell me. So let's go ahead and get into this here. All right.
Welcome to the Gray Stage Podcast, episode number 10. Today we'll be covering chapter 6 in the book by Greg Fernandez Jr., The Gray Stage. My name is Dan Hannon. I'll be joined today with Sophia, Catherine, and of course, Greg Fernandez Jr., the author himself. How are you doing today, Greg?
I'm doing well. Thank you, my brother. Hope you're doing good.
And how about Sophia, Catherine, and Anne?
We're doing great. At least I am.
Excellent. We've got an interesting topic today here for this book in this chapter. We're heading off with chapter 6 here for episode 10. We'll be talking about the kitchen laptop. And in this Crowley case, there's a lot of things that tie into this. And there's also, I think, enough questions and things that have come up, since then as well. A lot of people that are newer to the Justice page, some of the newer members, a lot of questions do come up surrounding this chapter. So this will be a good episode. I'll start off here by reading the first paragraph from Greg's book, The Kitchen Island. The laptop, labeled as AV-8, was opened to a black screen on the kitchen island when authorities entered the house. The device was plugged into a power outlet just above the kitchen sink, and the screen was black. Love, love in quotes, was written on the laptop cover. Anne, did you want to go give a little more of a background on this situation here?
Yes, I would like to give you guys a visual of this area where the laptop was found. There is a kitchen island in the Crowley home. The island basically divides the kitchen and the living room. The front part of the island is made of drywall and it's green. The top part is a granite type surface. That is where the laptop is sitting open. Behind the laptop, towards the back of the island facing the kitchen, you will see a sink, a cabinet, and in the corner is a dishwasher. There were some Christmas items and other things on top of the island. This episode is just going to focus on the laptop. So we just wanted to give you an idea of what you guys will be seeing and hearing about.
Perfect. All right, continuing on the second paragraph. Blood and partial fingerprints, end quote, were visible on the laptop surface and keyboard. Several blood stains were visible on the kitchen island counter next to the laptop. When the laptop was swabbed for DNA purposes, the black screen awoke to reveal a text message reading, quote, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," end quote. What do you think about that, Greg?
Well, I wish we had a better photo of it. I know we have the photo that shows where the text message should be, or where the text message is. For me, it is a little difficult to read. So that was the first thing. I wish we did have a better photograph of that, but that's okay. We'll go with the photograph that we do have. And this was one of the notes that was used to suggest that David Crowley was guilty, because he had written 2 notes in this house. And then the obvious question is, how do they know that David actually wrote this? And is this a suicide note?
Yes, and this is on the laptop. So once again, this is typed, and this was just brought up. In my assumption, this was like a notepad or a WordPad or a word processing type of a program that was opened up and someone just keyed it in. We don't have the name of who keyed it in or who actually did the typing, except someone just wrote it, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," and just left it up. And I don't think that when the investigation took place with this hard drive, and this all went to the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit, and I don't know if we got a date created or a timestamp as to when this file was created. And I don't believe the file was saved. I think it was just opened and left there in what commonly we would see in today's world be an untitled or a Microsoft Word or untitled document. But it still should have a created date and a created time. That would be interesting to know when this file was opened and created. We know it was never saved, so we can't really essentially get back to when whoever did it to get back to a time frame once again. But yes, it's done and staged to make it look like David had committed these heinous acts, had blood on his hands, and then opened up the laptop and started typing it. Now, the other thing we need to keep in mind is that the laptop was not shut off. It was kept open, and it was in a blank screen. I would call it either in hibernate mode or in a screensaver mode or in power saving energy mode. But all they did was, when your laptop is off for a period of time, even though it's still plugged in, you can touch the touchpad or the enter key or the space bar or some other key, and it'll wake it back up. It'll wake up that laptop. And I think that's what happened here. They were swapping the keys and activated and woke up that machine again, and that's when this arose. I mean, this thing was typed up there, meant for the first person to see it to know exactly, what happened here. I think is what the intent was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I also thought that it was weird that, maybe not weird, but it was very interesting, let's put it like that the where love is typed up, and I was able to find 3 places, or where love is actually mentioned. Love is on the laptop. It's also on the Amazon, whatever this is, Kindle, Amazon Fire. It's written on the back of that too. And then in the office bedroom, in dust, love is actually written on top of the computer there too. So that's at least 3 electronic devices. Love is not written on the on the Surface Pro that is found in the living room that belonged to Kamel.
And there's something I would like to add here too that I noticed, like right here. I took this photo, and then when you enlarge it, if you try to, look at the letters that spell out "I have loved you with all of my heart," there is no blood on the majority of those keys. So that means, you have some blood like on the A and a little bit on the O and a little on the D, but look at the W is clean, the I is clean, the U is clean. Those should not be clean if this is supposedly typed by somebody with bloody fingers. Being a typist, even if you're one fingering it, if you're typing with your two hands or if you're using one finger, there should be blood on every single one of those keys that spell that out. But the majority of those keys are clean. That, to me, tells me, what my assumption then is that the person who put that message on that laptop had gloves on. And that, to me, rules out David, because why would he put gloves on to type a message just before he supposedly shoots himself? Doesn't make sense.
And Catherine, that's a good point, because you would see by looking at this phrase that he wrote, I think the top two most commonly used letters were A and L in this phrase.
Yes.
A and L. And so you would think that there would be multiple blood marks on those two keys on the laptop. And what you're saying is that we don't see blood on the letters used here at all in that phrase, but what we do see is what appears to be a haphazard smattering of some blood on the laptop with David's with his fingerprints. It still looks staged because it just was there on random parts of the laptop, the blood, but not in the points that would be the last used keys that the person typed. And that's the point you're getting at, which is the most important point of this, which detectives did not seem to put together that scenario. Correct?
Correct, absolutely correct. And that should have been something that they should have first looked at. When you're looking at something that's typed on a computer screen, you're going to look down below and look at those keys, because they, I thought for sure they had mentioned the blood on the A key, and that just could be my imagination. But you look at a thing, and then you look down, and you're like, okay, is this matching up with what I'm seeing? And there is no match whatsoever. So right there, there's so many instances where this should have been a huge light bulb going off to these officers. And again, they either just completely ignored it, didn't think about it, or said, you know what, we have a scenario, we're just going to run with it.
Correct.
Looks like blood on the delete key as well. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't look at that, but I was looking at the I, and then spelling out the IHAVED, YLUWITH. And when you look at all those, the W is used a lot too, and it's clean. The YOU is clean, or the O might have a little bit. And I'm just like, this keyboard does not match with the so-called, last note written.
That I should probably be one of the most bloodiest if it's the first one, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, because if one hand is bloody, the other hand is going to be bloody. But even if they try to say, well, maybe just the left hand was bloody, well, then why isn't the W and the keys that are used with the left hand, why aren't those bloody? And exactly, the I, especially since that was used first, and the shift key. It would have been Shift I, because were these all capitals, or you would think I think at least the I was capitalized.
Yes, just the I.
Yeah, and so the Shift key looks clean to me.
Very good point, because these would be the letters most used in this phrase, and this was really, from what we can tell on the laptop, the only things that were typed. One can assume that the very last thing as far as the official narrative is David went to his musical playlist called Ascents and clicked play on that. But there was no other typing done on this laptop. immediately after the crimes were committed, except for this one situation. Should I go on to the next paragraph? I find that very interesting. I've got some comments on that, Greg.
Sure.
He says, quote, "I was not certain if this note was saved or otherwise date or time stamped," end quote. And this is what Detective Brian Bone reported. Now, I'll continue on. "The note was not signed and was in the format of a typed note," end quote. "Authorities assumed the message was written by David Crowley, but that assumption remains unproven." So back to this beginning part, we're looking at a date or time stamp on a file. Brian Bone is just the detective here, and maybe this is true that he did not know the date time stamp on this, but once again, the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit, this is all they do. This is what they do. There would be a file open. For instance, if I'm looking at not on a Mac, but on a regular PC, you'd have a document there with a little tilde in front of it as a temporary file name. That would still have a date and timestamp on that file, that temporary file, which goes in that temp folder gets saved in when you're as you're working on things. And then when you go to actually do a save as or save it and place it somewhere on your folder, it'll give it the actual name and the date and timestamp. But this would have had a date, time, and created when the file was open and someone began typing. And so Brian Bone, as a detective, may or may not know that, although I'm assuming anyone in today's world would at least ask that question. But the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit would have known that for sure once what that temporary file that was used sitting out there would still have a date and timestamp. So I don't get the fact that Brian Bone says that. And he does go on to say that it was not signed, but it was in the format of a typed note. Okay, that's obvious enough. And the assumption was that it was written by David Crowley. Of course, anyone looking at the scene, the way it was staged, is going to think that David did all these things. But these are all just circumstantial things that don't mean anything yet. So we really don't get any real good meat from the detectives on this. We just get several sentences of various assumptions, which doesn't do any of us any good. What do you think, Sophia or Anne, when you look at that paragraph?
I think there's a possibility also that this so-called note typed on a computer was typed before the murders, and it has nothing to do with the Crowley family being murdered. Because you see, like Greg said, the word love typed several times in the house. There's a bowl on the counter with those rocks with terms of endearment written on the rocks. There's that note on the fridge, which was, a loving note between a husband and wife. This letter on the laptop could have been just written as something special between the both of them that has nothing to do with suicide note or anything that happened after.
And I have to agree with that. I mean, it could have been written at any time. It's just that it's there on the screen. It's very possible that it could have been just part of the staging. It's like, oh, here, it's right here. We'll just use this as a possible suicide note. Just like other things that were around the house that were assumed were suicide notes and stuff.
The other thing I think with all suicide notes, whether they're written or typed, is the signature. You have to have that signature, something to say this is what I want, this is my wishes, or this is what's going on in my head, and then you sign your name. So this stuck out to me when I saw this alleged suicide note with no signature once again. And of course, when you get into staged crimes and situations like this, most of the time those are typed up. Those are typed to make it look like someone else is doing it. An actual suicide note, maybe multiple pages long, handwritten or however, to clear the air after the case is done, to let the ones still living know what was going on in there and what they were dealing with. So this doesn't have this. It's got another. It has that feel of staging once again. But you're right. It could have been something that he wrote back in October or November. It could have been something that he had written back in April. But if we would have had a timestamp that showed January 10th or something to that effect, it would have clearly led us into a much narrower time frame. And that's what we don't have here. That's what we don't get. And that's the thing that's important with this, I think. That would have been the first thing that the Dakota County Electronic Crimes Unit would have been focused in on, the timestamp, date and timestamp. So they finished up their investigation and gave the laptop back to the father. So it's too late now to go back and even look at something like that, unless Dan Crowley Sr. would know where to look on that path directory to see where that file would be sitting if it was still there to this day. And hopefully things like that were done, but as we can assume with everything else in this case, we can't assume anything. Greg, should I go on to the next paragraph?
Yeah, let's do it.
3 areas of Bloody Ridge detail were identified on the laptop and labeled as A, B, and C. Of the 3 areas, only area 1 was sufficient for latent print analysis. Item 54 is a CD of 25 NEF images of latent prints found on the laptop. A digital latent palm print of Area A was then labeled LP54-1. LP54-1 was searched in the Midwest Automated Fingerprint Identification Network, the MAFIN database, and no suitable candidate was generated. Additionally, no known palm prints for David Timothy Crowley were submitted or found in the BCA files for comparison to LP54-1.
So there's no way that anybody could ever claim that any of the palm prints found, if any of the palm prints were found, there's no way they can tie those to David Crowley just by this one fact here. It's more proof David Crowley did not do this. And it's more proof that people assume that David Crowley did, and that is not right. There's something wrong about that. There's no reason to, because if you're really looking for who did this, then you know you don't have any palm prints tied to David. You can never say that these prints are from David. But of course, we have the Gray State Goons who are running around telling people David wrote this. There's no proof that David wrote anything on this laptop, and there's no proof that any of the palm prints found at this scene match David, just by this one fact here.
Now, the question that I have, Greg, and this may be more of a question directed toward Catherine, is what I find in this paragraph is very, the words are crafted very interesting in this paragraph, meaning they couldn't find the search of the Minnesota Automated Fingerprint, the MAFIN database. No suitable candidate was generated, so they tried to do the match and they couldn't find it. Now that database is only filled with criminals, right? People with criminal past that have been fingerprinted, and so they couldn't find the match. And they also tried the palm prints to try to match those to BCA for comparison. Now, once again, if David was not a criminal or didn't have a criminal past, would his fingerprints even be in the databases of any of those 2 databases? And that may be a question for Catherine.
No, since he wasn't a criminal, his fingerprints would not be in the MAFIN, but they had his fingerprint card from the military. But just because they don't find it in a database doesn't mean squat, and I think we all pretty much know this, that just because someone hasn't been caught or hasn't, they may not have documented this before, or they may not have done this type of crime before. So unless they have been, like you stated, arrested, fingerprinted, and everything, their prints would not be in this database.
I've got a question on that. Just regarding this database, they're looking at fingerprints here, but then they're talking about palm prints. Shouldn't they be looking, I mean, can you tell from a fingerprint? Are you going to be able to tell, can you match a palm to a fingerprint?
It's been a really long time since I went through meth, but I remember them doing DNA, that they also did every fingerprint on both hands. They printed both hands very well, but I can't remember if they did a palm print too. So if our audience, if you've gone through the military in the 2000s, could you please let us know if they did your palm print too? Because I seem to remember that they did, but I went in the 90s. So, I mean, things could have changed.
And it's good that they're looking at this database, but is there a larger database that maybe in the future they could look into that isn't just for the Midwest?
And we could also go the route of knowing David Crowley's background. He was not a criminal, or not that we know of, that he didn't commit any crime. So I would guess his prints would not be in the MAFIN, his prints and palm prints would not be in the BCA, but we know that being in the military, he would have both his fingerprints and this is my opinion, his palm prints would be with the military, so they already have those things. But it says that no known palm prints from the military were submitted to the BCA.
Does the fact that they were looking in this database, does that show that they at least were looking for possible suspects, for somebody other than David? Because they could have pulled up his criminal record and found pretty quickly that it wasn't him. Does this show that maybe they were looking quietly for other suspects?
Well, if you look at the working, it says no suitable candidate was generated. So,
yeah.
Were they looking for other candidates?
Does the MAFIN database have palm prints, or would it just?
Well, when you look at it online, and it states here, and I'm reading from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension website right now, and it states the arrest records of 10 print fingerprint cards, and they may also include palm print cards. So they do have some palm prints on record. But I think the fact that they were looking in this database, I just think that's standard operating procedure. So they just kind of say, oh yeah, we ran it, we didn't find anything. You know, is my take on it. Could be wrong.
And that's good. That shows that they are doing, you know, like we've talked about previously, there are things in here that they are doing that are standard, which is good. That's what they should be doing. And that also shows that they do all of these standard things and still cannot find anything tying this crime scene to David, other than him being there.
Correct. Yeah, I think these were procedures that were followed, and no answers came back, which means that they were doing their job for the most part on a peripheral level. Found no answers, so they moved forward. But I don't think you would have any information in those records. Yeah. Anyway,
I mean, reading this, I would say that they basically proved that David did not write this. That's the way I read it.
I would like to add, okay, let's say you do believe that David wrote it for whatever reason. Okay, so first of all, police have determined no motive of why these deaths occurred. but we've heard various theories on what could have led David to murder his family and himself. And this note, if it is a suicide note, doesn't support any of those theories. This note doesn't show hatred towards Kamel's past or her being a Muslim. This note doesn't show obsession with Gray State or weird conspiracy theories. This note doesn't show PTSD. This note doesn't support anything that David has been alleged of doing. It doesn't support any of the proposed theories of why David would do this. And I think that in itself says this is definitely not a suicide note. And if David didn't write this, then it probably was staged.
There you go.
This just sounds like something that Kamel has written before. Didn't she write something on the back of a photograph and
Yes.
put it to her sister?
Yeah, I will always love you and Mom, something like that. The way this note is written, I'm glad you brought that up because it just reminded me of when it says, I have loved you all with all of my heart. Who is this message for? Whether it was written by David or whether it was written by, by killers, who would this be for? Who is this message targeted to? This is the first thing that comes up when the cops or the BCA swab the laptop. This was meant for them to see first. It's obviously not meant for them. It's not meant to say that David has loved them.
It is very nondescript. Yeah. And I had not thought about that until you mentioned it. It is extremely nondescript and vague.
Similar to the note that's written in the office bedroom. Who is it for? Who is it really for? Is it code word? Is it warnings? What is the real purpose of that writing? That's all I got on A, B, and C here. I'm just going through showing people some of the photos of after they were sprayed with a chemical. And yeah, they're palm prints, some type of palm prints. I'm glad, Catherine, that you were able to find that those would be included in that database, and couldn't find anyone. So it's just like can't connect it to anyone, including David. So there's no conclusion here. There's no, okay, we found this, it ties to David, this is how we know that David wrote this. You don't have that here in this case. If you weren't to look at these documents, if you weren't to look at these photos, you would not know that. You probably would not know that. If you were to just watch the slopumentary, you definitely would not know that. And so that's why it's so important to be able, time willing, to be able to look at this stuff, to be able to look at these documents, to go through them yourself. And so all of us here are trying to make that as easy as possible for people. Not to tell you what you should think, but when you look at this, how would you ever think that David Crowley did this when they clearly can't tie these bloody palm prints, these prints, they can't tie these to anybody. So in reality, we don't know who wrote anything on this laptop.
Yeah, I think too.
Has anything else on that? Go ahead.
And this is Dan. I think too, what we're looking for, or what we're seeing here, is everything is very vague. Everything is very general. Everything is left open-ended, and I think that's the other goal, if you will, for a staged scene. So you can't go too far down any certain rabbit holes. It's just left open to keep people guessing. That's their goal here, is to keep everyone guessing and wondering and not provide answers, is my opinion on these types of things. They don't want to go too far. They want to keep it open-ended.
All right. There's nothing else.
Continue on with the next.
Yeah.
I can continue on. At the bottom of page 51, it says, item 23 is blood swabbed on the surface of the laptop. DNA results tie the blood to Kamel, while excluding David and Rania. And so here we get once again, not the obvious, but it makes sense. That the blood used, whether it was writing on the wall or the blood found at the scene, seems to be Kamel's, which means either she was killed first or her blood was the most accessible for these types of things. But it doesn't give us the answer of who did the writing, who did it, who left the prints. We know that it's Kamel's blood. Anything else on that, or should I continue with page 52?
I'd say go ahead.
Okay, according to Joe Cooksley, quote, the item 23 blood stain was in close proximity to apparent bloody ridge detail. A chemical was used to enhance the ridge detail. The ridge detail was documented with photographs prior to and after the application of the enhancement chemical, unquote. This may be, once again, something Catherine could help us with this for those of us not in this field.
What's
a bloody ridge exactly?
The ridge detail, you see those little lines. Oh, here we go. I'm using my mouse, and you guys can't see my mouse. I'm sorry. But yes, those lines right there, that's the ridge detail. And that is what will make up and let them know if it's a palm print, the side of your hand, the fingerprint, or whatever. But those little designs there is what is known as the ridge detail.
Do these look like they should be able to get something, tie it to somebody at some point, or is there enough here or no?
That I don't know how much they need. And just to me, there's some pretty good stuff there at the bottom. It depends on where this is, is this like the side of the hand? I don't know. It doesn't look like fingerprints per se, but it could be the side of somebody's hand or somebody's palm. But,
this would be a right hand. This would have to be a right hand. It's on the right side of the keyboard, or the surface of the keyboard of the laptop. So that's where this is found.
Yeah, and it looks like a certain amount of pressure was applied, whatever they used, if it was the side of their hand or the front of their hand, because you see where some of the blood pools in certain areas, and then others you see the detail pretty well. Mm-hmm. So it kind of pools and spread out a little, in that area. But, there are other spots on there, not necessarily number 23, but I thought for sure that if I remember correctly, there was another place on there. I don't know if it was, which one is it? I'm looking at your book now. I finally found my book, where the detail looked pretty good, and I couldn't understand why they couldn't get, more fingerprints. There is plenty throughout the house, and not just on the laptop, but other areas where the ridge detail should have been more than sufficient for them to tell you who it was.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything on this image here, or item 23?
I can continue on. Blood found on the A, capital A key of the laptop was swabbed and labeled as item 24. Though collected and itemized, the blood on the A key was not submitted for DNA testing. I'll leave that there. How common is that, or uncommon, to collect it and then not submit it?
Well, they'll collect a whole bunch of samples throughout a crime scene, and then they will choose. It kind of looks like pick and choose, but and sometimes it will look randomized, but there's always a method to the madness. However, in most of the cases that I've been doing reading and research on, if there appears to be separate blood within the same area and they're not sure whose it is, they will test both samples. But if the blood is all within the same area and looks to have come from the same source, then they'll just swab one and then just test that. And here on this laptop, there's no proof that this is coming from the same source. So they should have swabbed that. Tested it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, looking at this image that I have up here, are there any? Is there any evidence that we see in any of these photos to tell what type of blood? Is this a hand that was just bloody? Is this a hand that might have been bloody for hours, for longer? The reason I ask is on the command key, on the lower left side here, where the command key almost looks like there's a drop there. It doesn't really look like somebody touched the command key. Looks kind of small, but it looks like maybe a blood dropling. So I was just curious about that. If there's any way to tell from the blood that we see on this laptop, is there any way to tell how old the blood on the hands might be?
Yes, you can tell if blood is sitting on someone's hands for a while before they touch, it will either flake off, or as the blood starts to coagulate, because obviously there would have been a lot of blood on their hand, it would have left a different type of impression. The types, and you're right, that does almost look like a blood droplet that was disturbed at one point, but I would have to enhance and enlarge that photo to tell for sure. But like with the A and the rest of it, that was all fresh blood.
On this F key, the F key looks kind of odd too, and I don't think there's any.
And for that one, it just could be the way the shadowing is and how they took that photo. It's really hard to tell, because what you're looking at, that little dark spot underneath the F, when you look at the J key, those little lines are for typists who, when you're not looking, you know your fingers are right on the home key settings. So you know that index finger, once it feels that little nudge, it knows it's on the letter F. So that just could be that. But is there extra blood? It could be. It looks like there could be some little drops next to that. But again, the photo is really hard to read.
And that's all I had for 24.
Should I continue on with 25, Grid?
Sure.
All right, item 25 is blood swabbed on the kitchen island countertop next to the laptop. This item was not tested. Neither was the blood stain on the tissue box. Item 26.
25 of all of the things here. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, that was it. So 25 is next to the laptop, was not tested. And then there was a small square-sized tissue box, item 26.
Yeah.
Also wasn't tested.
I think of all of the blood in the house, 25 looks the most, I can't think of a better word, but strained, or like, it's just, it doesn't look like prints. It's almost just like lines. I don't know. I don't even know. I mean, everyone who can see this for the podcast, people listening to the podcast, you need to go and see these photos. But when you look at item 25, what am I seeing here? This is, of all of the images here, this blood, it just looks, I can't even describe it but any other way than just strained or lines. It's thin lines, I guess. I don't know.
This is what they call, to me, that looks like transfer. And there's part of these types of lines as well on the touchpad. But yes, this looks like something was bloody and then touched that surface. So it transferred the blood from whatever it was on onto that surface. Would be my guess.
I have to agree with that. Like a sleeve or something.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But they just placed down maybe a sleeve or a rag or something like that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that would make sense.
I think it's interesting also. It looks like there was like a strand of hair by those bloody lines. And it looks like there was like a bulb or something at the end of the hair. I mean, could they collect DNA off of that?
Yes, you can get DNA from the end of a piece of hair.
And where did you see that hair? On the laptop here? Next
Okay,
to
so if you look at the laptop, it looks like there's a streak of hair. See, they have that, I think it was gold, it was the last picture you showed, number 25. See how there's the streak, and above it, it looks like a line or something? Yeah, is that a hair?
It might be hair. There are a few hairs on here. I've seen on the other side. I don't know if those are scratches or hairs, but there's some type of line. And even this this MiFi thing, this Wi-Fi thing that David has here in the upper, it looks like that has, there's something wet on that, almost like there's, I don't know if there's blood on that. Blood isn't mentioned here. A little bit below it looks like the USB port that you would put in for a mouse, for a wireless mouse. And he just didn't have, there weren't enough ports for everything, so one was taken out. So I don't think that this MacBook Pro, I don't think that this is where this MacBook Pro was used. It was purposely set here, and it was probably, might have been the first time this MacBook Pro was ever here on this kitchen island. All meant to look staged, all meant to look like just ready, just to have everything ready when the investigators come in, including not having it password protected. Same thing with the computer in his office bedroom. It's not protected by a password. That also is another sign that anybody could have gotten into these computers at any time and written anything that they wanted to and taken off anything that they wanted to at any time. This is almost like that open rear slider here. They're looking for things that they don't need to be looking for. They're looking for people forcing their way into this house when they have an open door. They're looking for reasons to think that David Crowley wrote this when it's clear anybody who had access to this house and via the open door, anybody in the whole world could have gotten into this house. In theory, they probably would have had to have known that dog in order to do that, but anybody could have gotten onto this laptop and typed, "I have loved you all with all of my heart," easily. So it's just more that just shows that it's not David. What's weird is Kamel's Surface Pro is protected by a password. It's the only one that of all of these three computers in this house, it's the only one that is protected. I wonder if somebody was trying to get something inside of that laptop. Maybe there was something there that somebody wanted taken off.
So that was the only electronics that had a password on it?
Of these three. Yeah.
How interesting.
Even the song choice, there was a lot of stuff made about the songs that were on this laptop. I'm going to go back to those too. It's playing randomly, and the fact that in this image, in one of the crime scene images, Curtis Mayfield, is that what it is?
I sure hope that people don't look at my phone list after I die.
Well, the whole thing is they were making a big deal about this song, and it's like, that is just the song that was playing while these photos were being taken. But there's several songs that were being played while the photos were being taken. But for some reason, this photo is the one, or this song is the one that ends up being the last song in Eric Nelson's film. Let me get to that. Yeah, right here. Fall Behind. Moses Mayfield. Fall Behind the Inside. So, there was a big deal made about that, but in these other photos here, there's a different song playing. You just can't see it that well. It's pretty interesting that the one that we can see super duper well is the one that just happens to be the song that's played at the end of the Sloppymentary. Some of the other songs, there's the Spider-Man 3 song, 2 Spider-Man 3 songs, maybe even more. It looks like 14 songs in total for the Spider-Man 3 soundtrack. And there's at least 2 of Kamel's quote-unquote friends in the police reports that said that Kamel said that they were going to move to California. David was going to work on the new Spider-Man movie, which probably would have been, I don't know if that would have been Spider-Man 3, if that would have been the ones that were made after this, but probably the ones after that, with Garfield, I forget his first name, but Andrew Garfield, I think was his name. But, so, this song list and all of these songs have been another interesting thing. The fact that this is a 53 songs, a 4-hour playlist. Be nice to know when the playlist was actually made too, and why this was playing here too. It just seems everything that's on this laptop, and they take shots. We have, I think, 3 screenshots that I just have here, and it's all different stuff in the background. Lots of different playlists, lots of different things going on here. It's got the podcast, Rania's favorite, so Rania had access to this too. This is playing through a Bluetooth speaker that died. Bluetooth, speakers don't last that long, so maybe the bodies were not meant to be discovered 3 weeks later, or 2 weeks later, or even 1 week later. Maybe they were meant to be found soon after these killings happened. That's all speculation, but just with that laptop, some interesting stuff. Go ahead.
I just find it curious that the Bluetooth speaker is so far away from being plugged in. I mean, where we look at the kitchen, that plug, I'm assuming the where the plug cover is broken near the sink, and we see that big power plug. I'm assuming that's where the Bluetooth speaker was being charged or whatever. But would it matter where it was placed? Could it have just sat up there on the island and they could have heard everything just the same as if it was near the living room? Or it's like, why did they need to move it and have it unplugged?
I don't see any reason for that. None here, definitely. I think I have an image of where that speaker. So here's the speaker. Hard to tell, but yeah, it's not. I mean, obviously, it had. I don't know. It would have to be somewhat close. I think the speaker could definitely work there. It's just weird that it was there. I pull up the image to kind of show where the laptop was, and then the speaker is somewhere around this area. But it's pretty interesting. Oh, this might be one where you can have. This one actually shows both of them. Looking at it from, if you're entering the front door here, you got the laptop over here. This blue mug is actually, it does say cop on it, so it's some type of law enforcement. The laptop does have a sticker over it too, and I don't know if all of them in the house do. I think they all might too, but you can see the distance from the laptop to where that Bluetooth speaker is.
Yeah, it's really not that far, so I don't think it would really.
And I mean, in this image, you can also see where those bloody prints are here, and that's where you would expect the laptop to be. That's where I would expect it, but it's not. So when the writing was, whatever was typed into this laptop, whatever was done with this laptop, nobody had bloody feet. There's no bloody feet there. Same thing with when words are being typed onto the laptop. Some keys have blood and other keys don't. And they all should. I mean, really, they all should. So there's some serious problems here. And these, again, this is just looking at the laptop, just looking at what proves that David Crowley wrote anything on this laptop, and we're just not seeing it. Now, I remember I got a few notes here. The type message and the written note in the office bedroom were both used to trick people into thinking these were suicide notes. That was a big thing. That was hinted in the early police reports. That was hinted, not the early police reports, in the early narrative, in the early media reports. Even when I talked to Kamel's sister, and she also said that those were suicide notes. And it shows how easily somebody can be tricked into thinking that they are when they're not. Neither of those two notes that are written are suicide notes. Not proven suicide notes. I guess if you want to believe they're suicide notes, you can, but why? Why would you think that? Without any proof of who wrote it, of who did it, why? I thought we were trying to find the truth here, not to play our guessing game. Let's see. To be clear, it cannot be proven who wrote the typed sentence on the laptop. So why was this assumed within 24 hours of finding these bodies? And when authorities realized they could not prove David wrote that sentence, what did they do? After they realized, months later, after they realized that it could not be proven that David Crowley wrote anything on the laptop, how did they respond? They just ruled the case exceptionally clear. That doesn't seem right. That doesn't seem fair.
No.
The fact that the laptop was found in sleep mode shows that anyone could have written these sentences. The laptop was not password protected, similar to the computer in the office bedroom, yet Kamel's Surface Pro found in the living room was password protected. So that's another thing that stood out to me. We talked about the A, we talked about all that. Yeah, I think we pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover. Item 24, where that A key is, have all heart. I mean, that A, there should be a lot of blood on that A key, but not just the A key. There should be a lot of blood on the H key. There should be a lot of blood on a lot of the other keys too. So it is very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. where the blood is on those keys and where it isn't, and why some things were never tested. I mean, I think the A would at least be tested. They test the surface of the laptop. Why not test one key at least? So that's all I got, good peeps.
Yep, same here. I'm down another rabbit hole just doing this already. I'm writing copious notes, and I will send it to you guys soon.
Yeah, I agree with Catherine. There's lots of rabbit holes and interesting.
I think the only thing. This is Dan. The only two things that I would think of that I would have liked to have seen on the police report was if the laptop, the MacBook Pro, was password protected at one point, when was the password taken off, or when was the password removed? That should be somewhere in the registry of that computer, the date and timestamp of when that was taken off as well, unless perhaps maybe David always had that off, but we don't know. The other thing would be, I know we talked about the Bluetooth and the speaker, and of course, the battery died, but what was the volume setting at on his MacBook Pro? Was it, 99? Was it 13? Was it 50? Was it, what was the volume setting? Was it meant to alert and wake up the neighbors, or was it set to a very soft?
Full blast. It's on full blast here. It's at the.
It is. Okay. Okay.
Now that's on the laptop. Maybe the Bluetooth, the Bluetooth could have its own settings too. So
gotcha. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. That's all that I had for today.
All right.
Yep, I'm done too.
The only thing I would add is not only are we not seeing blood on the keys mentioned, we're just not seeing blood, period. If David really did kill his family and himself and then dipped his hands in blood or whatever and wrote on the walls, there should be blood all over the keyboard, stuck in between the keys, on the counter. There should be, pattern of drips from the wall on the floor to the island. We're just not seeing blood, period.
Yeah, I would expect the laptop to be more covered in blood, like the island countertop also. But what we're seeing is just transfer marks. So it just doesn't make sense.
Since there's no blood on the back of the laptop, I guess this would have had to have been open.
Mm-hmm.
Which again could be another sign of a scene interrupted, I suppose. All right, well, if there's nothing else, then I guess we'll go ahead and shut this one down. I want to thank you all again for joining us here for episode number 10, The Kitchen Laptop. Episode number 11 will be released December 1st, and of course we'll continue on with chapter 6. In the kitchen, we'll be starting at page 52 in the physical book, and there is a lot of interesting stuff to go there. We're going to talk about the newspaper found in the kitchen, so that will be a good one to wrap your head around, because there's a few things there to me that do not make sense, but we'll go through everything in the kitchen, and we will continue to see that there is nothing that proves David Crowley guilty. So there's your spoiler for next month. God bless you all, and I'll go ahead and shut this down. Dan, any final words here? You took us in. Why don't you take us out?
No, I don't think there's nothing else. It's certainly interesting chapter, as is your entire book. And I like the reason I like the book, Greg, is that it's fact-based, it's evidence-based. There's no opinions in there. It's just laying out the facts, and it really exposes the things that were either not done correctly or not done at all, or somewhere in between. It's done in a very good way.
Thank you for that, brother. And I will shut this one down right now.
Welcome to the Gray Stage podcast number 11. My name is Dan Hennon. Today is November 22nd, 2020, and I'm joined with Greg Fernandez Jr., the author of the Gray Stage book, and along with Catherine and Sophia. How is everyone doing today?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Absolutely.
We've got an interesting topic for the podcast today. The topic is the kitchen. And if you're following along in the book, Greg Fernandez's book, Chapter 6, The Kitchen, we'll be starting today on page 52 in the book. Greg, do you want me to read that quote? Yeah, here's a quote by David Crowley given on March 7th, 2014. He says, quote, "The use of force, no matter the context, should be a shameful last resort, indicating an utter defeat of intelligent faculty. This is the difference between men and children, and also why our childlike society celebrates violence in its exercise of authority," end quote.
To me,
Anyone have any comments on that first quote?
It's a pretty powerful quote. I think there's a lot of things. If you read through David's Facebook posts and his Twitter posts, you're going to find a lot of non-violent posts here that I think we know that the investigators went through all of David's social posts, all of his Facebook, all of his Twitter, all of that stuff. So they had access to all of this, looking for anything that might help them understand why anybody on this world would ever think that David Crowley is guilty. And I think we have a lot of quotes in here, even going back all the way to 2006 when David was still stationed. There's a lot of peaceful quotes, and I thought that this was just one of those many that we put in here. So this is my favorite one, I think.
Very intelligent man he was, and ahead of his time, one could say.
And young.
I will start reading about the second paragraph down on page 52, then we'll have some discussion. Item 25 is blood swabbed on the kitchen island countertop next to the laptop. This item was not tested. Neither was the blood stain on the tissue box, item number 26. And so the tissue box you can see there on the screen for those following along is item 26. There was a blood stain on that, and it was not tested. Going on, in fact, 2 blood stains on the lower part of the base of the kitchen island, items 16 and 17. A drop of blood on the kitchen floor next to the dishwasher, item 21. Another spot of blood inside the dishwasher, item 22. And a blood stain on the underside of the kitchen island, item 28. All were submitted for analysis, but never tested. Any comments on that statement right there?
Yeah, I think if we go back to let's start with the tissue box here. So let me take a few steps back to look at that tissue box. What's pretty interesting about the tissue box is it's similar to the one bloody finger that is found in the hallway. So let me go back there before I start rambling on a little bit here. But it's what's pretty interesting is that, okay, if there's blood here on the tissue box, on the side of the tissue box, no blood mentioned on any other sides of the tissue box, and I've looked at this from all other angles too, and couldn't really see any other blood. Just that one little line there. No blood on the actual tissue. We could see that too. And generally no blood on that counter. So it's just kind of random, and I don't really understand how this would get here. And what is the purpose? What is somebody wiping up? And why not? Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I've always pictured when I see that item number 26 on that tissue box where somebody's reaching and their finger or thumb or whatever, and it's like you're grabbing a tissue and you're pulling it up. It's like it hits the side and then it goes up as they're pulling a tissue up out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I've always pictured this particular stain getting on the side of the tissue.
But how old would the stain have to be in order for the blood to get just in that one spot, not to leak when they pull out? Because when you pull out the tissue, it does require a little bit of force, and I would think that there should be at least a little bit of blood spatter or something, some droplets somewhere else.
Well, and we don't have a clear picture of the top of it, but a lot of it would depend on how dry the blood was on their hand, their thumb, their finger, whatever it was that touched that tissue box.
Mm-hmm. So would this be leaning more towards a drier blood, more towards a wetter?
Yeah, well, something that's not like fresh, wet or whatever, but I mean, and this is just my take. I could be completely wrong, but when I see that, that's what I envision. Because whenever like if you reach for tissue and half the time you don't even realize what you're touching.
Mm-hmm.
And this could have been just such a light touch. And it looks like it swoops up. So.
Interesting. Then looking at item number 16, the only thing about this is why this one, okay? Because we can clearly see on this wall here, if I back up a little bit, maybe one or two, in the high-res photos, you can clearly see that where item 16 is, along this whole wall, there's blood little spots here, there's blood spots here, blood spots. There's some other blood spots there too, so unless that's my dirty screen, maybe. Well, a couple of these might be my dirty screen, but I think a few of these are the actual blood spots on this wall. So that was my other question, was why did they select this one? Obviously, this one was a little thicker, maybe. Does this show us, what does this show us?
Nothing other than it's cast off. I'm not sure why they chose just that one blood drop, but maybe it was more prominent than the others and easier to stick a sticker on. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, look at you're right. Look at all those other spots on that wall. But why they chose that one, I have no idea.
And I would have the same question with item 17, because again, there's a lot of more blood here on this wall that you can see. It's all over this one. So why just this one little area? And then again, it's another interesting thing to go back to see. Well, they have it and they don't test it, but there's a lot of blood on this one here. Lots of droplets, similar droplets. Maybe even a thicker cast-off droplet to the right of where the 17 is. Which when you flip this image over, where it's actually.
Unless what they were doing was those particular drops were just going to be a sample of what appeared on that wall. So instead of taking a sample from every single blood drop, the chances are it all came from the same source. So maybe that's why they just picked one and stuck a tag on it. It's a guess. I'm not sure if it's right.
And who would know that this is cast-off blood? Would that be the Apple Valley, the BCA? Because I don't know if cast-off blood is mentioned in any of the reports or documents that I've seen.
Yeah, they don't mention any other. They actually don't even really mention what type of blood is on the scene. They'll say that there is a large amount of blood. According to a lot of crime scenes I've seen, there isn't a lot of blood here other than on the chair. But BCA would have known that by walking in. I mean, the police officer should have, but that's neither here nor there. Maybe they didn't. Maybe that wasn't something they studied, but definitely BCA would know it would be cast off. Just like, and that would be passive like we talked about before. But why they don't differentiate in their reports is a good question.
And no testing done on it. Same with item 21 and 22, where we have these just a few little drops. With item 21, you can clearly see there's some other drops to the left of it, to the south a little bit, and then 1, 2, 3 drops that are just kind of there. I don't know. I mean, this is the furthest. This is some of the furthest drops from the where the bodies were found, and how did the blood get way over here? With hair on top of it, dog hair. You can clearly see there's some dog hair right there, but so this is just a drop. This is, would you call passive? Is that what you said? Passive blood droppings?
Correct.
The same with 22, then, I'm assuming here, right?
Correct.
None of it tested. I mean, it's swabbed. They had enough to swab it, and it's just kind of baffling to me about, I know we've talked about this in the past, what was tested, what wasn't tested, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what was saved and what wasn't saved, too. I don't know. I would think at least 22 or 21, because they're both in the same area. I could see maybe not testing both of them. Same with 16 and 17. So it just seems, you would want to test one of them. They're in that area there. So,
I agree.
that's all I have for those items for 16 through 28. Unless you have, Sophia, anything else?
No.
Okay.
All right. I'll continue on. David's bloody cell phone, item 35, was found close to the tissue box. A blood mixture of 2 or more individuals was found on the phone. David was excluded from being a possible contributor. According to DNA results, quote, Kamel, Rasul Crowley, and Rania Crowley cannot be excluded from being possible contributors, end quote.
Now this is kind of another one that is where it's like we always talk about, and a lot of people have brought this up, where the blood is, where the blood isn't. Why is there blood here? Why isn't there blood there? And there's blood all over this phone, and a little bit of blood on the counter. You can kind of see that here too. So the phone was set down by a bloody hand. You can see that there's some scratches and everything on it, but there may be 1 or 2 drops on the headphones, possibly. When I was looking at it closer, I thought, okay, maybe there are a few others, but not that much. And if it's like, what is all this stuff here? Is all stuff that would David would have pulled out from his pockets, from his pants pockets, and that's kind of weird. I thought. I don't understand why there's 2 lighters there. They're not in the same place either. But just sticking to the cell phone, I try to look at the cell phone from all different sides, and again, it's just very frustrating to see how much blood is on this cell phone, and how does that blood get there, and why isn't it on the headphones that were in there? Everything else that's pulled out of the pockets, everything else here isn't bloody. Why is that one? I don't know. That just kind of bothered me a little bit.
Well, and I agree with you that the cell phones always bothered me as well, only because we know when Sophia was able to get those phone records, and we know that his phone wasn't used for any texts or calls or anything, so why would it even need to be picked up? Why would blood be on it? And if David wasn't making texts or phone calls, I mean, again, I feel like it's something the police should have just said, okay, this is weird, let's look into it.
One thing I have heard, Catherine, is that some have speculated that he was running his playlist and playing music from the cell phone. Now we know that's not true because he was running it through the media player on his laptop. So you are correct. The only use of this phone would be for calls and texts, and there were none. So that's a good point.
Yeah, and I've thought about that too, what you were saying about, I've heard the thing about the music as well. So if he's using his cell phone, yeah, why would he need his laptop? And vice versa, if he has his laptop, why would he need his phone? It just doesn't fit.
Is there any
We
significant?
know that
Go ahead, Sophia.
I'm sorry, possible mistake, by the killers, once again, trying to bloody up everything, but at the same time, doing it in the wrong things. And the question here is, why didn't the detectives pick up on that? Go ahead, Sophia.
I was just thinking that maybe they were trying to get some information off of that phone.
Yep, good point.
Very good point. I don't remember if it's meant, now that you brought that up, I don't remember if it's mentioned that the phone was locked or not, but most iPhones are, I would assume they would be. I mean, it is possible to change that setting, but when you have two of the computers in this house that aren't password locked, I don't know. That's a pretty interesting thought there. Same with these scratches that are on this phone too. I mean, that could just be one of these other items rubbing up against the screen of that phone, but it's an interesting place for the phone to be found, to be left here. I don't know what this other black thing, it looks like some type of remote control possibly, but these lighters, it's the more I look at some of this stuff, especially in these photos that we're going to look at here, the more it's almost like possibly they were leaving signs, they were leaving clues, things so that people would notice that things did not add up. And we're going to see that more as we go. Go ahead.
If you look at the headphones are placed on top of the phone, but they're not as bloody as the phone.
Yeah.
So they were obviously handled with cleaner hands.
Yeah, I think I found maybe one bloody area, one bloody dot where this Bic, where the Bic lighter is, where the text for the Bic lighter is. There may be some blood right there, but that's about it. I mean, there's no other blood that I can see in these photos here, and the headphones aren't on, so it's not like he's using them. I don't know what this silver
So they
thing
were
is.
placed on top after whoever handled that phone, and I don't know, it's just weird.
Maybe even at a separate time, right?
Mhm.
And it's weird to have the two lighters kind of separate too. I don't know, just weird things like that. Just wonder if David was in a hostage situation and maybe leaving clues around this house that he was hoping people would pick up on later on.
I think this is Dan. I think the subliminal message here also by the killers is to leave those lighters. Now, once again, neither of them smoked cigarettes. There aren't candles around the house, so it's leaving the detectives with, boy, these guys are smoking a lot of weed. Here right in the kitchen. Once again, out in front of the public, out in front of the child, they're smoking weed again. That's the impression I got. That could be wrong, but it's the subliminal that I think that they're left there on purpose, showing these lighters all over the place. Over.
That's a good point. Do we know if any of David's, the Gray State team, do any of them smoke?
That I don't know. I'm trying to think of any videos that I've seen of them. I don't. Never seen.
I don't think cigarettes, but I would assume weed. Yes.
Okay, because you brought up a good point, so I'll probably think about that more often, but I always thought about those lighters as being accidentally left behind, but the point you make makes more sense.
And they may have been accidentally left behind. The question is, were fingerprints taken from those lighters, and if so, whose fingerprints were on there? But we don't have that.
Yeah, and no blood on those lighters. So it's just weird. Blood on the cell phone, a little bit of blood on the tissue box, and really nowhere else on any of these items on this counter here.
I think what it screams once again is the phrase overstaging. So much was done and left behind on purpose. You have a bloody phone, but yet nice white clean earbuds laying neatly on top of him. Why? Why all this strangeness?
I've never heard of
I'll leave it
anybody.
at that. Yeah.
I've never heard of anybody taking stuff out of their pockets right before they kill themselves or kill somebody else or anything like that. It just seems weird. So overstaging does make sense and make the most sense, I guess. If that makes any sense at all to overstage, but we know, that's what we're dealing with here. We see that in so many of these photos here. Anything else on the cell phone? Not, the next screenshot I have up here, Dan, if you want to read the next paragraph.
The next section says, some of those items were retained in their entirety and could be tested later. According to the BCA report, the contents of items 11, 12, 14, 15, 23, 24, 27, 35, 38, 39, 50, 51, and 52 have been retained in their entirety. End quote.
Now, they had a typo in there, right? Because I was looking, well, maybe they meant something else. But I looked up entriety just to see if it was a real word. And
No, it's a typo.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
But you never know,
I'm glad you corrected it in your book, though. Good job.
Thank you. I did not want to leave that one. We're going to talk about the big blunder that I made in my book at the end here. But, yeah, so that's good. I think 50, 51, and 52, those are CDs of images. I do believe that's correct. But it's good that these ones that they have, but again, it goes back to some of the ones that we've just looked at, 16, 17, 20, 21, 22, and 28 are not on this list. And I don't know, am I just overthinking this of why those ones wouldn't be? Because they're smaller, they're not relevant, they don't really help them prove David Crowley guilty? Is this more evidence that they were only really looking at and collecting and testing things that they were sure would help them prove David Crowley guilty, even though they failed at that? I'm trying to understand their logic behind all of this.
Well, you bring up a good point, because they didn't test those items, and there's no reason to get rid of it, because if you're going to destroy the evidence you have in the case, you're going to destroy everything. So why would they not keep in their entirety blood swabs from items that were never tested? I didn't even see that, Greg. Good point.
I just want to say hi to everybody in our live chat room too. Thank you all for joining us. Ellie, always good to have you here. And Denise, always good to have you too. So yeah, thanks everybody for listening in as we record this podcast, which will be put out for the Gray Stage podcast on the 1st of the month. So we've covered a lot here so far, but the big one of the big ones for me here is that newspaper. The newspaper, I think, gives the two newspapers really help give us a good timeline and really help us figure out, or should. They should have given us a good timeline. But we have a lot of problems with this. There's problems just looking at the photos, because once again, we have things that are moved, things that are taken out. What I want everybody to look at in this photo here, two things, I guess. I don't know what this other trash can is to the left. And so that's going to be another thing about what is in this kitchen drawer here. You can see that it's open, okay, because we do have photos. The police do have photos, not the BCA, but the Apple Valley photos do show this same drawer closed and photographed. So here, this is still a BCA image. I'm just running through the BCA images here first, and so we can see that it's still kind of open. The dishwasher is open as well, and you can see it's open just a little crack there. So this is how they walked in and found this. So obviously they're going to look through this trash. So my question here is, are these both recycling? Dan, do you know this style, or does anybody know this style? I mean, we have one recycling thing here. We don't have one of these pull-out drawers, though. But if we did, I would think one big garbage one would be
I can
recycling.
answer that, and typically when the drawer pulls out like this, you've got two receptacles, one for the trash, one for recycling. And so that's usually how it goes. It looks like the front one there is trash. The one in the back is newspapers and cardboard and juice containers and things like that for recycling, potentially. But that's how that would make sense as far as the setup.
That would make sense, but that's not what we're seeing here. There's paper in both of them. There's a milk carton or some type of a carton in both of them too. And so if these aren't, it is possible that they just got lazy, but it's one of those other things where I'm kind of wondering were these signs here? Were there some type of signs that they were possibly leaving here so that people would notice that one should be recycling and the other should